All right, so here we go. We're going to be talking a little bit about schedules of reinforcement, right? We talked about reinforcement and punishments during our operant conditioning notes and discussion. So now, much like we talked about pairing with classical conditioning, we'll talk about schedules of reinforcement on how do we create this strong rates of learning. Okay, so here we'll go through a few of these. We've got B.F. Skinner, probably the most notable psychologist that's attached to operant conditioning. I know last time we talked a little bit about Edward Thorndike, but Skinner, and also he had boxes just like the puzzle box. The Skinner boxes, probably the most notable again psychologist in operant conditioning. And here's a video you can watch on your own and kind of explains some of his work. But let's jump in here. And we're going to focus on this partial reinforcement, right? Continuous reinforcement, we're looking at, when you do an action or a behavior, you're always going to get a response, okay? But if we look at partial and intermittent reinforcement, where only some of the time that you do that behavior, you get a response, the interesting thing, as it's shown down there in the partial reinforcement effect, is that actually creates stronger, longer lasting learning, okay? So understanding that, let's kind of go through some of those. Okay, so if any of you are golfers, and I'm a golfer, obviously an amateur. Some shots are really good. Some shots are not so good. But it's the good ones that happen randomly, not all the time, that make you feel so good and keep you coming back. Same thing as slot machines and things along those lines. So let's talk about the different forms of it. So we have fixed ratio schedules. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to be reinforcing on a fixed number of responses, right? So every time you get a response, you're adding to them. So for instance, if we have a rat, as stated here, on a fixed ratio 25 schedule, it means every 25 times they hit the bar, they'll get a reward. Well, before we can get there, you've got to do this thing called shaping, right? Where you create the behavior that you want to have studied or imitated. So you would have to, for instance, reward the rat for getting over to the lever and then pushing it, and then reward it, for every 2 pushes, and then 3 pushes, and so on. So once you have that condition and you get to 25, you can start to fixed ratio to check the responses. Typically, you're going to see kind of a burst, pause, burst pattern, right? You go really fast to 25, pushes, eat the pellet, take a little break, and then come back, 25 pushes, eat the pellet, take a break. And you see that down here with the chart, right? You see the really steep increase in responses, and then it levels off for a short period of time, and so on. In college, we had a Subway pretty close to where I lived, and at that time, they had kind of a frequent customer card. So we would, once somebody started into their card, we would go there all the time just so we could earn a free sub because we were in college and we were poor. But then if nobody had a reason to go there, we would typically frequent other restaurants, right? Then we get a variable ratio schedule. Okay, this is where the average number is based on, the number is based on averages, not a set number of responses. So variable ratio, for instance, by the time it's all said and done, we'll have an average number. So here we've got an average number of 20 pushes. So some of those pushes could come back to back. Some of them come every 30, every 10, every 20. Who knows? So what this does is this type of schedule creates a really high, steady rate of responding. Okay, so you get a lot of consistency with this one. People will really get into it, and that's where you see it in stuff like slot machines, because you don't know on that next pull when it's going to be there. Okay. Whereas on the fixed ratio, you get the fastest, meaning they're going to go push 25 times real fast, get their food, and then relax. It's happening real fast. Variable ratio has got the highest overall or strongest rate of producing responses. Next, we got fixed intervals. So remember, ratio is about responses. Interval is about time. Okay, so a fixed interval is something's happening at a specific time. So for instance, we've got, down there with the male. The male's a great example of this. Okay, so If we take the mail happens to come most houses roughly the same time every day if they're on schedule. So when you look at the chart, you're going to have very little activity over a period of time. And then when it gets closer to the expected time, you may go check the mail once, twice, three times, a little more activity, get it, and then you're not going to check it again. Okay, so for instance, if you have a rat that's on a 2-minute fixed interval schedule, it doesn't matter how many times they push the bar in between those 2-minute chunks, they're not getting anything. So they'll learn to not push it a lot until kind of the same amount of time has gone by, and then they'll push it again and get their reward. Okay. So you'll get, like it shows there, a little bit of a scalloped, graphed response. And then we get a variable interval schedule. So variable interval schedule, you're looking at random timing. Okay, so if you got like it says here, a variable interval 60 schedule. So every 60 seconds, something's going to happen on average. That could happen, within 2 seconds. That could happen within 3 minutes. But as long as when the trial's over, it averages out to 60 seconds, then you're in good shape. Some examples of these are things like checking your email, or for many of you, checking various social media feeds. Okay, means it happens often. Sometimes you get into a real focus on it, and you're just clicking on your phone over and over again. And sometimes you'll go maybe an hour without it, or an entire class, hopefully. Pop quizzes, good examples of this, and those are great educational tools when used properly, as well as fishing. Fishing is a good example of this, because you can go out fishing and you never know when you're going to catch something. You could catch, fish 2 casts back to back. It could come later, right? So it's based kind of on a time continuum. Cool little chart here to help you understand it. Remember, ratio is responses, interval is time. Fixed is going to be a set number, whereas variable is going to be random. And here's taking all those different charts that we're showing you and kind of overlapping them in one.